Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 2020 and 5780 Yom Ha'Shoah ceremony. Unfortunately, we are not able to remember the Holocaust together in person, but the Holocaust Education and Reflection, or HERE Club, compiled aspects of our ceremony.
This live stream comprises a message from Barrack's Human Rights Club, the reciting of the Kaddish, several excerpts from the junior class's journals when traveling in Poland, and the incredible story of survivor Peter Stern.
We would also like to recognize next year's HERE Club leadership. Elon Gordon, Ida Gnarly, Shira Amar, Mark Rubin, and Matthew Garber. Your passion and enthusiasm for Holocaust education ensures that our Barrack community truly never forgets. Daniel Bernstein is representing the Human Rights Club and will now share a few words.
On Yom Ha'Shoah, we mourn those who perished in the Holocaust. We remember all of those lives and wish someone had been there to stand up for them. We wish someone had stood up for them in the beginning when they were the victims of racism. We wish someone stood up for them when they were being persecuted. And we wish someone had stood up for them when they were being killed in concentration camps. But today, while we are feeling the pain of our own history, we also have the opportunity to help others from being doomed to the same fate. We can stand up for victims of racism, like minorities around the world. We can stand up for victims of discrimination and persecution, like Muslims in China or women in Saudi Arabia. And we can stand up for victims of genocide, like in Darfur and Myanmar. As people who personally know how painful this is, let's say never again and advocate for others, just as we wish someone had done for us.
Thank you, Daniel. Elon Gordon, grandson of Holocaust survivor Cantor Israel Dubner, Zichrono Livracha, will now lead us in the Kaddish.
Yitgadal, Auschwitz, V'yitkadash, Lodz, Shemei Rabbah, Ponar, Be'alma Divrach Irte, Babiar, Be'amlich Malchute, Maidanek, Be'chayechon, Uv'yomechon, Birkenau, Uv'chaye Dechol Beit Yisrael, Kovno, Ba'gala Uv'izman Kariv, Janauska, V'imru Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah Mevrach Le'olam U'mei Maya, Yitbarach V'yishabach Terjenstadt, V'yitpa'ar V'yitrumam Buchenwald, V'yinaseh V'yitadar Treblinka, V'yitala V'yitalal Vilna, Shemei Dekudesha, Bergen-Belsen, Brichu, Leila, Mauthausen, Min Kol Berchata V'Shirata, Dachau, Tush Bechata V'Nechemata, Minsk, Tamiran Be'alma, Warsaw, V'imru Amen. Yehei Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya, V'chaim Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael V'imru Amen. Oseh Shalom B'imrumav, Uyaseh Shalom, Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael V'imru Amen.
David Mellis, the grandson of a Holocaust survivor, Shira Amar, Mark Rubin, Matthew Garber, and Ida Gnarly, will now show a video about their experiences in Poland.
Black and white pictures felt more real than seeing everything in person, in color. Dark stories, on a beautiful day at Auschwitz. This is what you don't see in the textbooks. 70 years later, welcome to the present. Poland 2019. Plaszow. Underneath our feet lies the ashes of many, many truckloads. To my right is an apartment complex with a pretty walking trail. Over a concentration camp. To my left, mothers pushing their babies along the trail, their toddlers playing on the memorial placard, a couple walking their dog, a man urinating, staining land that was already stained, a construction project, not for restoration, rather for the city's waterworks, one example of Polish Holocaust denial, rewriting, rather erasing history. Today at Auschwitz, it is a museum run by the Polish government, where they serve pork, where I was asked to take off my kippah going through security, where there is a gift shop, where Jews coming to pay their respects have to pay to use the restroom. The Polish government is bulldozing over the field of Plaszow. One day they will do the same to Auschwitz, when it is no longer profitable. In the streets of Krakow, they openly sell stolen Jewish relics, stolen right before the Jews were murdered. Anti-Semitic graffiti is rampant in the streets of Warsaw and Krakow. When synagogues become museums and gift shops, our history is slowly erased and commercialized until we cease to exist. When nobody has any respect for the past, What lies in the future? Hope. Hatikva.
As I stepped off the coach bus, I felt as if I was in a movie scene. As we walked a few blocks further, it felt like a fantasy. The houses looked as if it was part of a green screen recording a Hollywood movie. Light green, hot pink, purple, light blue, and many other eye-popping colors on the way to my most emotional experience in Poland and during all of Moss. As we walked down a steep hill to approach the cemetery, my entire mindset changed. Huge tombstones with blue fences surrounding it caught my eye. As I was eager to see the significance of the cemetery, the core teachers at first gave us 20 minutes to write in our journals and explore the cemetery. Then after, we separated by our classes and had a discussion of our thoughts of the cemetery and significant childhood memories. After the discussion, we were told that we each had letters sent us from our parents about Poland and what we may expect. When I received my letter from my counselor Noam, I went to sit on the step right under the statue surrounding the tombstones. As I saw a letter from my grandmother, who is a Holocaust survivor and is 91 years old and still living, I immediately broke into tears and could barely read the letter. It took me lots of time to get up from where I was sitting because my emotions seemed to not allow me to leave the cemetery without reading the letter from both my mom and my bubby. Starting with my mom's letter, then my bubby, this had been the most emotional I've ever been in many, many years, and probably will be for many, many years. It had been the children's cemetery in Tarnow, which caused me to display some of the most emotion to my loved ones, for my loved ones, ever.
Poland entry, October 27th. As I sit down near the pond, in the distance, to the right and straight in front of me, I can also see the remains of the camps the Nazis set up. But then again, as I focus on the pond, I cannot help myself but also see Hitler's face in the reflection of the dark water. Not only did Hitler take away the beauty of the pond, which radiated honesty and warmth, but he desecrated nature and dumped 250,000 ashes of Jews into this pond. I feel that what the Nazis did here is despicable. But really, I cannot even imagine nor comprehend how dishonorable the Nazis were. I cannot imagine the suffering the Jews went through during the Holocaust. For Jews, burial is important. By dumping the ashes of thousands of Jews into a pond like they are just trash, shows what a cruel and disgraceful man Hitler was. As I sit down here, writing in my journal, I cannot help but think about how quiet and calming it is. It is so ironic because I know that only about 70 years ago, there were shrill screams of agony by the Jews who were struggling to flee this place. The pond is surrounded by nature's beauty and the memory of thousands of Jewish lives that were drained at the hands of the Nazis. It is hard to believe that in the past, the Holocaust happened right here at this beautiful spot where I sit and write in my journal, where the trees and their green bounty emanate light and softly whisper in our ears. Beauty changes depending on what is occurring around us. Jews during the Holocaust were not fortunate to live in beauty, while we today are fortunate to live a life with beautiful homes and a great education, with only some fear of anti-Semitism. So we should stop and think about all the people that perished in the Holocaust and remember them. Thank you.
October 27th, 2019. Towards the end of our standard tour of Auschwitz-Birkenau I, we were told to sit against a wall and watch a film. The dark room is engulfed by the footage of families before the Holocaust took siege over their lives, oblivious of their fate. Before me emerges the video of a mother and her young daughter. They dance on the edge of a shore. Like a mirage, the pair shift and sway with the waves. I see their toes skimming the surface of the water, taunting the ocean. They make an imprint that ripples and ebbs. I hear El Malay Rachamim beginning to play in the background, a faint echo of mourning that pulls me in. I close my eyes and see my own mother and me in the ocean. There we find sanctuary and escape. As we swim further, the water's depths wash away the pain and leave us in bliss. We float on our backs, letting this water carry and uplift us. Like a narrow bridge between time, this footage creates a link to the past, one memory to another, one complicated, loving relationship with the other. Both are preserved by this connection. That image fades as I watch the other home videos of families. I see them at birthday parties or sharing innocent moments along metropolitan sidewalks. Their faces are etched in my mind, haunting and calling me. Unlike this entry with my pen, their futures have been engraved in stone. This knowledge breaks me a little bit. I feel helpless, hopeless, in a battle against time. Yet, as I step out of this dark room, I am contradicted. I see a sketch of a bird, perched on a windowsill, likely drawn by a child. That was their form of redemption, despite being surrounded by devastation. There will be painful experiences in my life over which I will have no control. However, this tiny bird made me realize that I can find my own freedom through hope. God, full of mercy, who dwells above, give rest on the wings of the Shekhinah. El malei rachamim, shochen b'mamim, hamtzeh menucha nechona al kanfei Shekhinah.
430,000 pairs of shoes. This is 7.16% of the Jews that were killed. They can't be real, but in reality, they're right in front of my eyes. All unique pairs, but turned to a dusty dark gray due to age, causing them to look identical. They weren't the same, though. One might have been a Jew from Krakow, another a local Christian from Majdanek, and another could have been a Jew from Hungary. They all had different backgrounds, experiences, and tragedies. The shoes that I have on right now have their own too. They're my everyday white shoes that go with everything. I trust them enough to take me through this horrific place. I'm now looking at bones. Bones of people who attended those synagogues I saw in Krakow and Lodz. Bones of ordinary and harmless people. Bones of those who walk the same streets I've been walking the past week, but for longer. They walked those streets for their whole lives. It was all they knew. And here I sit, staring at the pile of ashes of those innocent and harmless people. God created earth and humankind. Why is the destruction of both allowed? The image of God has vanished in this place I am currently sitting in. The dust of the earth turned to the dust of humans.
We are honored to have Mr. Peter Stern, born in Nuremberg, Germany, and survivor of the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp, here with us today. He will now share a story of survival. Welcome, Mr. Stern.
Good afternoon. First of all, I want to thank you, not only for inviting me, but letting me be a witness to what you have created of bad memories of our Earth. Since so many of you are somewhat familiar with my story, let me start with precursor. My name is Peter Günther Stern, or Germanic. My brother's name is Samuel. And that difference is due to the laws that were passed in the city where I was born, Nuremberg, the Nuremberg laws. Not only did those laws take away the ability for people to make a living, their citizenship, their identity, they also were forced to name their children prescribed names. Those names came out of the first book of the Bible. Male, could be Moses, Abraham, Samuel. My parents had seen American movies, and therefore they picked Sam, possible thing for the future. My father was an auto mechanic, had his own business, had a very big reputation as an auto electrician, lost it, and had to sell it off. He then went to teach at the Jewish school. He taught young boys about machinery and possibly the start of a trade, or when they could emigrate somewhere else. Finally, when they would go to the East because the story was that they were going to settle that place in the east. By 1939, when my brother was born, we no longer lived in the apartment that my parents had. None of the Jews lived where they had originally been living. They were all living in what was called Jew houses. There were 52 houses in Nuremberg, which had numerous families in them, depending on the size of the house. In the house that we lived in, which was right near the center of town, the Bahnhof, there were about 5 families. We were there until 1941, November 1941. At that point, an edict came down that there would be a train of Jews, all from Franconia, Bavaria, about 500 of them from Nuremberg, to go to Latvia. Of the 520 people that left Nuremberg at the end of the war, there were 17 survivors. My mother, brother, and I among them. When we were shipped to Latvia, to Riga, wasn't that, certainly not for a 5-year-old, that bad a trip, although I can't imagine what it was like for the adults. We were sent into the ghetto. And the Riga ghetto, although not mentioned, it wasn't that large, was a death camp. People from there were shot. And I remember looking out a window and seeing truckloads of people going away and knowing that this was not a good thing at my age. We were in this ghetto for a few months, and then we were taken to a small apartment house from which my father would take the boys and go fix cars for the army, the German army. And the people in the house had a job of sorting clothing. Because the people who had been killed, their clothing was then parceled out to the various piles and categories and shipped back to Germany. We were there for some time, a few months, and transferred to another place where the cars were right then there. And again, was working on the cars. We were there till, I would say sometime in 1943, end of 42. You have to remember, being a boy of 5 or 6 years old, time is a very fungible commodity. May seem like eons might only have been a week, but might have been longer. When we were there for that length of time, we were finally moved to Russia itself. And in Russia, again, it was to fix cars. We were on a farm. I don't know how far from the front. There was constant fighting, which my brother and I slept through, except one night that we both remember. But that was it. There were no guards. The rule was if any of the boys tried to escape, the rest, including my brother and the rest of the family, would be shot. And we were there. It was, for me, not that bad a time. There were no guards. The soldiers that were there played with us as if we were kids on the street. I think it was a reminder of home. There were two German-speaking kids. While there, my father and I think some of the boys were taken deeper into Russia to fix the transformer that had been damaged. And while there, the Soviets counterattacked, and my father somehow saved the life of a German officer. They all returned, but at this point, because Germany was losing the war, we were transported back to Riga. The boys back to the ghetto where most of them were killed. And my family was put into the civil prison, men's civil prison, and stayed there for about 3 months. We stayed in one cell. My mother never left it. Until one night we were taken out, and this was the first time I saw my parents scared, although I'm sure they must have been many other times. And we were warehoused in another cell for who knows how long, and then taken into small trucks which were loaded with clothing. And we, with that clothing, were shipped back to Germany. Once we got into Germany, the soldiers who had smuggled us through many different guard posts gave us up to civil authorities, and we ended up in front of a judge who sent my father to Buchenwald, where he died, and my mother and brother and I to Ravensbrück, the women's concentration. Loaded with various people, criminals, political prisoners, Jews, gypsies. And the gypsies, who are the forgotten people of this Holocaust, they were the people most experimented on in Ravensbrück, medical experiments on those women, most having to do with sterility type of operations. The camp, which was crowded at all times, got more and more crowded as the camps in the east were being closed, and they were sending those prisoners there. We were there until February of 1945. We were there for the longest period of our imprisonment, a little over a year. We were then by cattle car shipped to Bergen-Belsen, which at this point was the absolute hellhole of the world. Food, I think, was a questionable thing at any time, and towards the end, not an existent thing, nor was water really available. We were rescued on April 15th by the British forces. At which point we were then transferred to an ex-German military training base, And we, by the end of 45, actually September of 45, were healthy enough to be shipped to Nuremberg, where we stayed for a year, then 2 different displacement camps, displaced persons camp, and then moved to the US, which is another saga, and I will save that for some other time. Thing that I would like to talk about today is what is to a degree happening today. I got to be a science teacher, and the most important lesson that I learned from life and from teaching, and something that I wish to teach everyone, is how important it is for people to care about each other, to care about strangers as much as you care for yourself. Because if we don't do that, we forget who we are. I usually end my talks making sure that the audience realizes that there is something that they can do. And I think it is just that, to care for others as much as you care for yourself, to speak up when you need to speak up. I'm going to quote Martin Luther King Jr., who said, "In the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends." I think it is imperative that the youth speak up what they see is wrong and what they feel needs to be corrected. If there are any questions from any of the students, I'm more than willing to try to answer them. Anybody out there? Hello? 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 All right. Guess I have a few more minutes to speak. Well, I'll revert back to one of the other things that I talk about, which is a Philadelphia native named Walt Kelly, who invented a character called Pogo. And for those people old enough, they knew that Pogo ran for president, or was put up for president. He was a cartoon character who fought Senator Joseph McCarthy and a lot of other candidates. And he also was, this is important today, this week, for the Earth. He was one of the first proponents of that. And his most famous cartoon of Pogo was basically a small raccoon coming out of the Okefenokee swamp, saying, "We have met the enemy, and he is us." And that's the thing that we have to remember. All these things were perpetrated on us by variations of us. I think I'm headed. Somebody's going to have to volunteer to speak.
I'll ask a question, Mr. Stern. I know you were very young during the Shoah, but did you ever lose any of your Jewish faith that you might have had, or like in the future after the Shoah?
You have to remember, by the time I was conscious, there were no more Jewish services. The most I remember is on Friday nights, my mother lighting candles. But that was more of a ritual than faith. And so it was never really that much something that came up in the camps, not to my knowledge. I don't remember the women, Robin Sprick, talking about religion. By the way, Robin Sprick, when it was relatively normal camp, had 20% Jewish population. The rest were made up of all those other people. Anyone else?
I have a question.
Yes.
I was wondering, during your transfer between camps, when do you feel, at what point do you feel that you lost your innocence?
Lost what?
Your innocence. Or
I don't know. I don't know if any of the kids. I thought we had more awareness, this is in reflection afterwards, than some of the adults. We had nothing really to compare it to. This was our life. It was even worse for my younger brother because he became into awareness in the camps. He had no memories before that. The children of the Holocaust, they were children to begin with, were robbed of a lot of things. That innocence.
I have a question, if that works.
Yes.
What did you think when your father saved the German officer, and did you support his actions in doing so?
I had no knowledge of that till after the war.
Well, now that you do know, do you?
And certainly I do, because for the very simple reason, if he didn't, he knew what was going to happen to his family. He considered himself the protector of that family. And I don't know of any other children that survived the Riga situation. And why that officer put us into that prison, obviously in gratitude for what my father did, but he could have easily not done a thing. I think next year, if you do it this way again, you have to have a sequence of button pushing.
I'm sorry, excuse me. I also have a question from Rebecca Wilson, and she's a 10th grader at Barrack. She asks, what is it like living through this pandemic as a Holocaust survivor, and whether or not it brings back memories?
It brings back memories only in the sense of that feeling of not knowing what tomorrow holds. Particularly, I live in a CCRC. All of you who live close enough to the quadrangle this. And the population is of an age that people are dying. Not within the community I am, but the attached communities. So you never quite know what's coming around the corner.
One of our students asked, what is it like to live through the pandemic as a Holocaust survivor?
Deja vu all over again. That's a quote, Yogi Berra.
Hi, Mr. Stern. I have one question from an 11th grader, Allison Goldstein. Did your father saving the German soldier help your family in any way?
Oh, I'm sure we did. I think this was a direct payment for that. My mother told my brother and me that we were the only two German Jewish children who went into the camps as children and came out of the camps as children. I have since found two other children who survived the camps. Both of them came out of Terezin, which was the show camp that the Nazis used to show the world that they weren't as cruel.
Mr. Stern, we wanted to thank you, and we also hope that everyone found the virtual ceremony meaningful and that it served its purpose to show how hatred manifests into danger.
The Here Club would like to thank the Barrack administration for allowing us to respect and honor the memory of the Shoah, our student participants, and Mr. Stern, who is with the Holocaust Awareness and Education Center. We would also like to thank Senora Schwartz for her unparalleled dedication to Holocaust remembrance.
Lastly, many Holocaust survivors are experiencing intense loneliness in this time of worldwide isolation. If you are interested in learning how to help, please email Here Club and we will tell you how you can help. If you have any further questions you'd like to ask Mr. Stern, also please email Here Club and we will make sure they get to him. This concludes our assembly. Thank you everyone for your time. You may now leave this meeting. Hope everybody stays safe.